Keegan, I think you'll be the best to speak to this. Why do we have Seventh-day Adventist stuff over here?
Because they're a hot mess.
They're a hot mess.
Hey, speaking of the Catholics,
how did they distort the gospel, and what makes them fall into the line of a cult?
They come out of the Millerite movement, the same movement that birthed the Jehovah's Witnesses. They followed a guy named Miller, who predicted Jesus' second coming, but then when it failed, he says, well, he actually came spiritually, which read Matthew 24.
Oh my,
doesn't work.
Exactly.
But,
oh my goodness.
but he adds to the gospel. And so traditional Seventh-day Adventism followed a teenage female prophetess, which already so many red flags right there. Self-proclaimed teenage female prophetess named Ellen G. White. Her husband denied the Trinity. She refused to affirm the Trinity, really. She played loose with it. She said that she had all these prophecies from God. They literally have something called the health gospel. And that influences their veganism. They'll say that traditional Seventh-day Adventism would say that worshiping on Sunday is the mark of the beast and therefore the unforgivable sin. If you're not vegan, again, you are giving into this system of things, which is just, again, same language as Jehovah's Witnesses because they come from the same group. And so they're adding requirements to the gospel. I don't have a problem if you've got a personal conviction to worship on Saturday.
Yeah, but eschatology.
So totally fine if you have a personal conviction to worship on Saturday. Totally fine. But if you then say, if you worship on another day, you are going to hell, you've now added effectively a requirement to salvation. And that's the problem. And so that's why I say they're a cult. They are very cultish, denied the Trinity, denied Jesus' divinity, if I remember correctly, said all these bad things added to the gospel. However, she failed to appoint a successor. And so now there are two branches in their movement, which is why I say they're a hot mess. They're the traditionalists, which believe all that stuff. And there's more of the kind of compatibilists. They try to make her teachings compatible with the gospel. But they would say they're sola scriptura. They'd say the scripture's up here. Ellen G. White could be wrong, and if she's wrong, we will reject those words from her and accept the Bible. They accept the Trinity. They accept all these things. They'd say you should worship on Saturdays, but it's not a salvific issue. They accept some weird doctrines, but I think they are saved. They accept the same gospel, all this. They personally decide to be vegan, which again, bad idea. Paul says you're weak if you do. That's an out-of-context Bible verse, but he does say that.
That's an out-of-context Bible verse. Hey, it's okay to quote out of context if you acknowledge it's out of context.
Exactly. It makes it all better.
You're already starting a new cult. That's amazing.
And so the compatibilist wing, because no strict hierarchy to keep their members in line was ever established, their members can just go whatever way they wish. And some of them have reverted back to basically Christianity. And I think eventually they'll just become straight up, Protestants. In fact, most of these people will say they're Protestant. It's how far they've gone.
Well, it's important to take note with really any of these cults. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to go with the source text and this is what they should believe.
Yeah.
But whenever approaching anybody, always ask.
Yes.
Because
you don't know.
You have Mormons who know virtually nothing about what they believe.
Yeah.
Who I believe have a higher chance of being saved. Not accidentally, but just by not knowing what they believe.
Yeah.
I would not jump to say that most Mormons are saved.
No, never.
Muslims, especially Western Muslims, do not really understand the Quran.
Definitely not saved, though, because they reject Jesus. And
Definitely not saved. Definitely not saved. I will give the Book of Mormon credit. In its first few pages, you get the Trinity.
Yeah.
Even though they deny the Trinity and probably the rest of it, first few pages, the testimony of the 8 witnesses, I believe, ends with the Trinity. Mm-hmm. So, great for that.
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witnesses, I forgot what I was going to say about that. Never mind. Continue, as you were saying. Yeah, that's what it was. Jehovah's Witnesses actually are one of the only cults that pretty much everybody you encounter knows what they believe.
Yes. I respect them for it.
Yeah, they are well studied in their heresies.
Incredibly respect someone who at least knows what they believe. And we have the same thing with Christians, right? Is all Christians should believe exactly what the Bible says, but you can't assume that when someone walks up to you and says, I'm a Christian. Most people who say that aren't. Most of them still think that they're a good enough person to go to heaven, and that's why they'll get there. And honestly, even those who are saved don't actually always believe what the book says. Most Western Christians, especially post-sexual revolution, completely ignore the chapter on head coverings. They should believe it. They don't, right? Same thing with women voting, although that one I give more credit for because it's not like you have one chapter where Paul's like, women shall not vote. Mm-hmm. But he does have that for head coverings. And so we've got these things where like actual Christians evidently should believe things in the Bible, but they just don't. Mm-hmm. And so there are people who probably really are Seventh-day Adventists who are aware of some of that troublesome stuff and just don't believe it. And so we should always approach the person, find out, what do you believe?
Yeah,
hold their feet to the fire of their book. Yeah. Because as James White has said, right, you need to convert a Mormon into Mormonism to get him out of it. Mm-hmm. The point being, he needs to recognize he's got a problem and it contradicts with the gospel. So you put him at a crossroads. He recognizes, okay, I've got a problem. I need to look to Jesus, and then hopefully becomes a Christian.
Yeah. What I really respect about Muslims is the fact that if you question a Muslim on what they believe, I have almost every single time heard them say, if I'm wrong, do not look down on Islam, because I'm fallible, I am imperfect. Amazing. Go to the source.
Yep.
Excellent. Your source is horrible, but
I'm still looking down on Islam because I've read the source.
With Christians, right? You have a lot of people who leave Christianity because of the Christians.
Yes.
It's like, what do you do? God's bride is unfaithful. That's kind of been the
church
the
dinged
problem.
veil. I'm so sorry. Don't leave because of that, please.
Yeah, it's like, this Christian was mean to me. Yeah.
And we installed a fog machine in Pastor's skinny jeans. 1, leave that church, but join another church. Don't leave the faith.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, always go to the source. Like exactly what you said, Keegan. When you're talking to somebody in any cult, go to the source.
Yep.
Bring them to the source.
Yep.
And specifically ask exactly what they believe, because I remember you mentioned that the Seventh-day Adventists believe that it's the unforgivable sin to worship on Sunday.
At least they should.
They should.
Yeah.
Most don't. To be entirely honest, most Seventh-day Adventists are in the compatibilist wing now. There's the traditionalist holdout, but that's what happens when you don't appoint a successor and you have no way to enforce doctrine.
But I've also heard some argue that instead of the unforgivable sin, it is instead the mark of the beast.
Yes, and so they play footsie with it. Yeah. They'll often still acknowledge, worship on Sunday. There's technically nuance. So
either way, you're pretty much damned.
Yeah. So they'll say, when the Antichrist comes, the symbol of his authority will be worshiping on Sunday, and that's what he'll command. If you currently worship on Sunday, you're wrong, that's okay. When the Antichrist reveals himself, if you follow his commands, which would include worshiping on Sunday, then you'll get the mark of the beast, and you'll be damned. That is a different claim. It's still erroneous, it's a dangerous claim, but that is a different claim than saying, it is the mark of the beast right now, and you're damned already.
Yeah.
2 different things. Because as Christians, we do believe that there will be an Antichrist, and non-Christians will take the mark of the beast. And so their claim about it being one of those attributes of the Antichrist, a defining attribute being worshiping on Sunday, that's erroneous. Yeah. But there will be heretical attributes that the Antichrist will require people to follow, and there will be evidence that those people who follow them aren't Christians. Mm-hmm. And so that's basically their claim. They're adding one weird requirement that the Antichrist will make, but they're saying that if you do it, it's evidence you're not a Christian, and you'll get the mark of the beast. Yeah. That is a completely different claim than the reverse, or than the other.
I think it will be at least, it should be tellable for Christians to realize that the Antichrist is the Antichrist.
Yes. And so, again, they are historicist pre-mill with their own spin on top of it, of Adventism.
So how do they relate to the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Both Millerite movement.
Okay.
Both believe Jesus has returned spiritually. Mm-hmm. They use the same vocabulary. They both have their conferences. Call them the same thing. They have the same hierarchy, the same church structure. Mm-hmm. They originally had almost identical tenets of denying the Trinity. They both have this weird thing where they believe that Jesus and Michael the Archangel are tied together somehow. Mm-hmm. The difference now, today, although I don't know if this is original, but the difference today is that Jehovah's Witnesses will say, Jesus is Michael, meaning Jesus is just an archangel. Some Adventists will say Michael is Jesus, and that's different.
It's
because
a title. Yeah.
Yes, because what they're saying is when we have a pre-incarnate showing of the angel of the Lord, that angel of the Lord's name is Michael. Mm-hmm. That's not denying Jesus' divinity, not denying the Trinity, nothing. It's just giving a name, a label, to the angel of the Lord that we see in the Old Testament.
Right.
It's still wrong, but it's less concerning than Jehovah's Witnesses. But it's less concerning than Jehovah's Witnesses. And
are these the guys who say that Jesus was the greatest of God's creations?
Yes, firstborn of all creation.
Yeah.
First created being, all of that. Again,
which is how they distort the gospel. Yeah. Right? They take away Jesus' divinity. Mm-hmm. They add works. They add works. They have a very big they're really big on the do not seek independent knowledge, right?
Oh yeah, the original sin is independent thinking.
Yeah.
According to Jehovah's Witnesses.
So is that why the Watchtower exists?
Yeah. So the Watchtower was originally just Charles T. Russell. He was the faithful and discreet slave, and he
Great
was.
title.
Yeah. No. It comes from a parable taken out of context from Jesus. But faithful and discreet slave who dispenses spiritual food to the congregation, and the institution built around him became known as the Watchtower. Today, because again, Charles T. Russell sets up a successor. That successor then has other people join to be his like counsel, basically. Mm-hmm. If I'm getting this history correct, it's a little bit fuzzy because Jehovah's Witnesses don't emphasize their original leader. Their original leader basically just sets up a succession, dies, and their succession just runs with it and future-proofs the religion so it can survive longer. It gets a council of people, which now compose, I believe it's the General Assembly. That might not be right. It's been a while. They're the faithful and discreet slave. Now it's a plurality of people, generally between 5 and 12 in number. Morris was one guy that just left, for instance. He just got, he left the top. He was in the top ring. He's left now. But anyway, they have this top ring that lead to the Watchtower and therefore the organization, and it's just dispenses down. And the way they justify it is similar to Judaism, right? With Judaism, it has the righteous ones that can communicate with Christ. With God, but as Christians we believe God, Christ, you know. But they communicate with God, dispense spiritual food to their people, their followers. Jehovah's Witnesses basically practically believe the same thing. It's the same lie, just wrapped up again by Satan in new wrapping for different people. You have the faithful and discreet slave, this little council of people. They actually communicate with Jesus because Jesus is spiritually returned in the top story of the Watchtower, which again, directly in contradiction to Matthew 24, that says if anyone tells you that Jesus has returned in an upper room, do not believe them. They literally believe Jesus is spiritually returned in an upper room. They communicate with Jesus and dispense the spiritual food to their congregation, which is why you find salvation through them, because they're talking with Jesus.
Sorry, go ahead.
Which is just like a tangent of why I think it's so great to look at the Bible and then look at these cult things. Because it's reflecting that not only is the Bible isn't just making broad statements about the false teachers, it is literally predicting the false teachers that are going to come. It's really insane if you look at it, the specifics.
Yeah, Jesus specifically says things that seem incredibly targeted to ward against erroneous teachings that would later emerge. Just very pointed, specific statements like the upper room thing. And then you find a cult that comes around, Jehovah's Witnesses, who literally believe that. And so the foundations for these two cults are almost identical. This one, Jehovah's Witnesses, established good leadership, succession plan, and a growth strategy to keep their members in line with original doctrine, more or less. They come out with new light all the time. For instance, now they can grow small beards. They don't have to wear a three-piece suit anymore. They still have to dress nicely, like Sunday best, but not three-piece suit.
They're liberalizing.
Yes, they are actually. They are. And they no longer have to fill out time cards of service time. Instead, it's measured, if I remember correctly, it's now measured by your output, right? So if you are able to meet with a lot of people, that's what they look for. They don't need your time slots. And so they change things, but they're more or less original doctrine. These guys, no leadership, no succession plan, no growth strategy. Their members just kind of get to do whatever. And so, like, most of them don't even believe their cult doctrine anymore.
So to a certain extent, you know, the Seventh-day Adventists are very Protestant. With today, the Jehovah's Witnesses, a good way to picture Jehovah's Witnesses is baby birds in a nest.
Yeah.
They sit there with their mouth open.
Yeah.
They encourage study of the Bible independently, but the way you do that is through their workbooks.
Yes, because their workbooks are written by the people in the Watchtower who are dispensing spiritual food from Jesus to you.
I would say most Jehovah's Witnesses almost believe the exact same thing because it is directly fed to them exactly how you believe it.
Yes, and that is how you manage a cult.
Oh, yeah.
That's what you need. That's why Seventh-day Adventism I rank so lowly. Not lowly as in like lowly in value, but like low in scale.
Yeah, them being the worst cult out of the ranks is a good thing.
Yes.
It's good.
Completely. Because when you don't have a succession plan and a way to keep your growth strategy going, keep your members in line, your members just won't stay in line. Give it 150-ish years, and your cult will be completely different. And they're like the caterpillar that's now turned into a butterfly. You've got a little, like, still dandruff from the cocoon hanging on, but mostly you're a completely different creature that's basically Protestant.